and time to get back to on our flight. And this time we'll make sure we take Qantas so that we don't get delayed. So we move to Australia. In fact, our next panel chair is my very, very good friend, Mark Jankelson. Mark is the SVP Melbourne chairman, and also on the board of SVP International along with me. And I think he and I have some great times. He also is, that's a well-kept secret, but he's probably the best walnut farmer in Australia. But we're not here to talk about walnut farming. So I'll hand over straight away to Mark and let him get on with the session. Mark, all yours.
Thank you, Ganesh. Ganesh and I often have WhatsApp chats about cricket. And it depends on who's winning as to how the conversation goes. It gives me enormous pleasure to introduce this panel on success stories of transformation. We have a truly inspiring group of speakers who you'll meet shortly. Over the past few weeks, I've had the honor to speak to all of them individually before the session. And I've been struck by their vision, their bold aspiration, their courage, their determination, and especially their passion around making an impact against a backdrop of enormous social challenges. I also find it remarkable how, when faced with the challenges of COVID-19, they've been able to use the favorite word, pivot, and continue their work without interruption. So there are many learnings to share in this session, especially how to create sustainable organizations. One of the things I'm always interested in is why people do what they do. And in talking to each speaker, I found that each one had what I'd call their moment of truth that catalyzed them on their journey. So I'm hoping that in the course of their chat with you, they may share that. So very quickly, the format is pretty much following the last panel. I'll introduce each panelist in turn. I won't introduce them all in the beginning. They will speak for 8 to 10 minutes. And after 5 speakers have finished, we'll have, depending on how the time goes, some Q&A time. So put your questions on the chat line and I'll pick them up. And then I will wrap up and hand over to Govind, whose next panel session will commence at 7 p.m. India time. So to set the scene, let me introduce our first speaker, Paul Higgins. So Paul is a professional futurist. He established Emergent Futures, which is his consulting company, to combine his long experience in business with his training as a futurist to help organizations in the creation of strategy. It's kind of a long way from his starting point, which was in veterinary science, and some may know this. Paul wears many hats. He writes and presents regularly on future disruptions to business models, and he consults to a range of organizations and how to think about the future. Paul's also a fellow member of SVP Melbourne, and I can tell you that he is the sort of person you'd always want to have on your team. I find him challenging, creative. He always sees the world from a different perspective, and I often find myself thinking, I didn't think about that. So Paul's going to talk to us about the post-COVID world, the way he sees it, and what are the opportunities for non-profits in this post-COVID world. So over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Mark. I'm a futurist, as Mark has said, so we're going to talk about transformations, but because I am a futurist, I'm going to talk about transformations in the future rather than what's happened in the past. It's a great honour for me to be part of this group and presenting to you tonight. So I'm just going to swap over to a presentation sort of version of this because I like to use pictures quite a lot. And what I'm going to talk about is China platforms and not-for-profit strategy in terms of transforming the future. And these may seem a little disconnected at the moment, but I promise you I'll bring them all together. So last week I was reading this report from the Leading Edge Forum in the UK, which was looking at the sort of competitive tensions and geopolitical tensions between America and China. And that's going to shape a lot of the world that we live in. And one of the points they were making is that that competition is different than America in particular has had in the past. So they're pointing out that it's not like the battle with the USSR, where USSR was a geopolitical rival, not like an economic battle with Japan in the past, where Japan was an aggressive economic competitor, but that China is four things all at the same time. And that is US's main geopolitical rival, their largest supplier, their largest market, and their toughest competitor all at once. And the reason I'm putting this up is because the response that the Leading Edge Forum was saying, or one of the responses they talked about, is relevant to India in particular. So I'm not really talking about China or America winning or losing here. It's more about a balance of the rest of the world in terms of one not dominating and what we need to do. And one of the conclusions of the Leading Edge Forum was we need balance, and to have balance, one of the things we need is a strong India. And a strong India needs a strong not-for-profit sector, just as any country in the world does, but a strong not-for-profit sector is certainly important in India as well. And here in Australia, we've this post-COVID Build It Back Better sort of discussion. We're having this sort of discussion here between the fact of large not-for-profits having resources, balance sheets, reserves to cope with what's happened with the COVID pandemic, and small organisations not having those resources but being closer to the problem, more able to deal with the individual requirements of individuals. And there's some concern that we're going to lose quite a few of those smaller organisations, not because they're bad at what they do, but because they just don't have the resources or the balance sheet strength to get through the pandemic. I think we need to think about that and how it might be a false dichotomy. And that's where the platform part of this comes in. So I'm asking myself the question here in Australia with things we're doing, are platforms one of the answers in terms of a response to the problems and issues we face post-pandemic? And what I mean by platforms is not necessarily what you might have thought about them before, but as a scalable collaboration agreement, a capacity to put people together, to put producers and suppliers and customers and clients together in a scalable agreement that allows them to do what they want to do, but build on top of large infrastructures, components, industrialized processes, a whole range of things that enable that to happen. And as Pablo Picasso was supposed to have said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So if China's doing a really good job of competing and doing all those things I spoke about before, we should look to be stealing from them as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about Hire, the Chinese company, as an example of the sort of change that I'm talking about. So Hire has 80,000 employees. By any measure, it's a large organisation. But they have internally 4,000, this is the last set of data they have, 4,000 micro enterprises. So if I have an idea and Mark wants to do it with me and a couple in the audience want to do it as well, then we have the capacity to go to the central organisation, Hire, and go, we've got an idea, we'd like to do this, will you help fund that? And we'll run our own micro enterprise. That micro enterprise runs its own profit and loss statement. It actually buys services from other micro enterprises inside Hire, but it can also go outside and go, you know what, we're not getting what we need, we'll buy those from somewhere else. And so it's very, very nimble, agile sort of system for an organisation that has 80,000 employees. So you've got that micro enterprise forming the core of that, and that's where they've been historically to some extent. Where they're heading to now looks a little bit like this, which is a little bit of a complex diagram, but essentially what I'm pointing to are what are called these EMCs. And those are ecosystem micro community contracts. They're scalable, flexible contracts that allow all of those micro enterprises to form a subsystem or ecosystem within Hire itself and with outside enterprise at the same time. They can get services from shared platforms, from other platforms inside the organisation. So what I'm looking at here in terms of Australia, and I think it's worth thinking about from the Indian perspective, is forming a consortium. We're in the early stages of that at the moment, where we will take some of these new ways of doing things, not necessarily old platform thinking, but some of the newer platform thinking, and experiment in the not-for-profit sector about what that might look like. So what we're looking to do is bring together 8 medium to large size organisations in the not-for-profit sector here in Australia, around 80 to $100 million turnover organisations, and put them through a process of how do we think about this differently? How can we apply some of this new thinking? And it has 3 steps. The first one is baby steps. We can't take some of these organisations who are used to being in manicured, organised gardens and put them out in the wild. They're not going to survive that. So it's about how do we assess their capacity and help them get to that next stage. The second step is contextualising it. You can't take something from Hire in China or some other organisation in Italy or whatever it may be and just plonk it inside a not-for-profit organisation or an ecosystem of not-for-profit organisations in Australia. So we have to contextualise. It's about going to first principles and trying to apply that with the knowledge that people have already, while opening up their minds and boundaries about what can be done. And largely it's about experimentation. So how do we take some of this stuff, apply it in the real world, experiment with the view that there are experiments, and therefore we will have large numbers of failures in that process. So we have to prepare people for that. So I ask myself again, are platforms part of the answer? My answer is yes, but that begs the question, what is the question? And the question in my mind is, can we build it back better after the pandemic? And can we build a network, an ecosystem of not-for-profits of various sizes that can deliver to the people that need it rather than the old systems we have? If anybody wants to contact me, talk to me about this, think it might have some application where you are, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I'm happy to take some questions during the panel session. And again, thanks for the honour of having me present to you today.
Thank you, Paul. As always, a challenging set of thoughts, and probably does feed it in somewhat to our next set of speakers who are looking to scale in various kinds of ways. So let me introduce our next panelist, Safeena Husain, who's the founder and executive director of Educate Girls. So Safeena is a London School of Economics graduate. She's worked extensively with rural and urban underserved communities in South America, Africa, and Asia. And after returning to India in 2007, she founded Educate Girls, which she's going to talk about, a non-profit organisation that partners with government to identify, enrol and retain out-of-school girls and improve foundational skills in literacy and numeracy for all children. Under her leadership, Educate Girls was announced as an audacious project at the TED 2019 conference, where Safeena shared the audacious plan of empowering over 1 million girls to enter the classroom by scaling Educate Girls model to 35,000 marginalised villages by 2024. And the potential economic and social impact of this, as you'll hear, is huge. Safeena's work has been widely recognised, and she has been the recipient of so many prestigious awards, it would take me too long to list them, but believe me, there are many. If you haven't watched Safeena's TED Talk, I can tell you she is a very inspiring speaker. And she's going to share with us her experience in scaling Educate Girls. It's a wonderful story, both personal and organizational, and I feel there is much for us to learn from it. So over to you, Safeena.
Thank you so much, Mark. I do hope that you can hear me. And yeah, it's just so fantastic to be here at Samvaad 2020, and thank you, Ganesh, for inviting me. And today I kind of wanted to just really, in a tight and brief way, present the journey of scale of Educate Girls. I started it 12 years ago, and we work in some of the most rural, remote, and tribal areas. And we started, in 50 villages, and today we are in approximately 18,000 villages. So it's kind of been an exponential growth story. We have kind of crazily doubled in size almost every 18 months. And that's kind of insane to kind of put it mildly. So I thought, like, in these 10 minutes that I have, I'll kind of walk you through that journey a little bit and what we have sort of taken away from that kind of a scale journey, what we've learned, and just see. Yeah, so we started in 2007, and today we are approximately 1,700 full-time employees and about 13,000 Team Balika community workers at the village level. And in the last 12 years, together with the community and government support, we've actually been able to bring back around 750,000 out-of-school girls back into school and improve learning outcomes for about 1.3 million children. So that is, but before I kind of get into the scale journey, and this is my job, I have to talk about why. Why is it that we're kind of focused on girls' education? And as Mark said, it is my personal story as well. I grew up with a lot of violence and poverty and abuse, and education was really my own way out of all of those kind of challenges, and being able to deal with all of those and make something and to kind of be able to embrace the opportunities that came my way. So I think I do this because it is true to what I need as a person, but also because it is one of those transformational pieces. They say 9 of the 17 sustainable development goals you can impact positively if you educate girls. Anything from health, nutrition, fighting poverty, employability, immunizations, like every single indicator can actually be impacted by girls' education. And interestingly, climate scientists through the Drawdown Project recently rated 80 actions to solve global warming, or to reverse global warming rather. And out of 80, at number 6 was girls' education. And number 6, and this is very interesting, at number 6, it's actually rated higher than solar panels and electric cars. That's how powerful it is, because educating girls, sort of it reduces fertility rates, and therefore you can reduce carbon emissions, but also more importantly, it builds climate resilience. So we can't overlook the importance of this particular mission, especially in today's time, because COVID had made, everything much worse, and especially for our little girls. And also because it's something we have to do just once, so, and that's why I want to scale it, because today is the day, and if you solve it once, if you solve it for a girl, she is 200% more likely to educate her children. So you can actually, it's a battle of our lifetime, but you can actually solve the problem of poverty and close that gender gap and illiteracy gap forever. And, India alone has over 4 million out-of-school girls. So we have a very large part of the problem. We are, one of the highest in the world. And the reason girls are out of school are because of what I call the 2 Ps, poverty and patriarchy. And where these 2 indicators meet, where you have people who are really poor and where you also have people who are socially marginalized, they are, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBCs, minorities, where these 2 combinations come together, it is a toxic combination when it comes to out-of-school girls, because that number just absolutely explodes in a big way. So given the size of the problem that we have, given what causes it, what is it that we do? So Educate Girls, very simply, we go into a village, we find a village level community volunteer called Team Balika, And by training them, we actually go door to door and find every single girl that's out of school. And once we find every girl who's out of school in a village, we work with the family, with parents, with the, neighborhood committees, with village committees, everybody to bring her back into school. And once she's back into school, we work on making sure that the school is girl friendly. It has a toilet, it has boundary walls, and also impact learning in the classroom by doing supplementary remedial education in Hindi, English, and math, and working on life skills. So that's kind of the model, but the way we do it is a little different. It's very data and technology based. So even the door-to-door survey that's done, it's done on a smartphone. Every single worker that we have, our full-time staff, has a smartphone. We have our own app. Every village is geotagged, and now every household is geotagged. So the data that's coming up to us is very clean, clear. It's just in time, so that we can actually plan things and put resources that are required very, very quickly. And obviously, it's a big lever that allows us to kind of scale. So that's kind of why we do it, and the model. And we started in 2007 and very rapidly went from 50 schools to 500 villages. And just in a few years, I found myself in like 5,000 villages, and we were doing this in Rajasthan. And I was kind of reflecting back, and obviously a lot of these things become clearer in hindsight. I didn't know them then, but I think that some of the things that really helped with this scale were obviously a very clean and clear vision of success. There was, we knew that there was an out of school girl. We could visualize her. She's fetching water, or she's grazing goats or grazing the cattle and doing the household work and not going to school. And then our vision of success was very clear. You could see that she's in her school uniform and she's walking to school and she's having her midday meal with her friends, and she's learning and she's completing her education. And I think that is really, at least for me, it is really the core of being able to scale things, because everybody needs to have that same point of arrival and that same destination point. Whether you ask me or you ask a Team Balika volunteer in Jhabua, both of us are aligned. And therefore you can move large organizations in that direction. So I think that vision of success is absolutely was the bedrock of everything we did. And then obviously that our model was, community owned. It was community run because of this army of gender champions, the Team Balika volunteers, and also because our teams were local and very mission driven. I have somebody who leads, I won't take his name, but he leads one of our districts in Rajasthan. And he himself, he was married off in the 3rd grade. He has experienced child marriage. He understands what this means and what impact this has on a human life. So all of our team, 99% of them, come from the same villages where we work and have experienced patriarchy in the same way that we want to actually change. The model is also very highly codified, and obviously that's incredibly important to scale. And I think the other thing is that when I first built the model, I did 2 things, which, in hindsight, I'm glad I did them that way. I didn't know that would be useful. But A, the model was built on the Right to Education Act. So we leveraged the entire, policy framework. And second, we actually built a 100% saturation approach. So a lot of nonprofits and NGOs in India, they say we're in 50 states, and then they're like, okay, we're in like 10 schools in each state and all the rest of it. We actually took a very different route, and we said if we were going to get into a district, we were going to be in every single village in the district, and in every single village, we were going to go to every single home and knock on every single door. And I think that 100% saturation approach of hotspots, what it did for us is it unlocked massive economies of scale. So it made the model from the beginning incredibly cost effective, like insanely so. A lot of people would look at me and say, these costs don't make sense. And I was like, yeah, they do make sense. And that's because we had this incredible sort of saturation model. The third piece is, I think we've been a little Soviet at heart in the sense of we built 5-year strategies, So I think that helped us to avoid the pitfall of making, 1-year projects and parachuting in and parachuting out. We actually built a 5-year plan so that we knew where we needed to get in 5 years. And so we could raise multi-year money that could help us reach our destination. And the scale becomes very intentional with that. you can actually make investments today for what you need in 3 years down the line, or 4 years, or 5 years down the line. So I think that kind of a 5-year medium to long-term strategy approach was absolutely really, I think, like a key enabler of scale. And also our teams they knew what is going to happen this year and what are we going to be doing in 5 years. And I think that builds a lot of clarity, again, for an organization to scale and to be able to make the appropriate timely investments and strategic investments and talent and technology and process and all the rest of it. And I think at this point is like, especially for Govind, I know Govind, is I think we forget, and thankfully I had a donor who was really smart and strategic. I feel like one of the biggest bottlenecks to scale is the founder. You know, and a good founder can actually make things work, but also, you know, there's founderitis, and that can actually become your biggest bottleneck and can do huge disservice to organizations, is when the organization kind of outgrows or is hitting up against the founder. And I think I was very lucky. I didn't have the self-awareness, but I was very lucky that we had a donor who actually, you know, funded professional coaching for me. It was unheard of. I was like, what? Who is this man? But it was like having that professional coach really kind of helped me to be 2 steps ahead of what I needed to bring to the organization. And I think, you know, I wish that a lot of nonprofits and a lot of nonprofit founders would actually, you know, donors would invest in that, because I think it's just so incredible. But even though we were scaling so rapidly from like 50 to 5,000 villages, I was really worried. And I was worried because I was like, I'd never really seen scale, and, you know, I'd never even had a job anywhere. As a founder, you haven't actually worked anywhere, so you haven't seen it. So you don't really know, and it made me really uncomfortable. And I was like, are we just like replicating, or are we still going to have value add for that millionth girl that will come into the program in a few years? And that was really, and that worry was really the genesis of the Development Impact Bond. And obviously everybody thought we were totally insane. It had never been done, you know, in education in the whole world. It had never been done in anywhere outside of US and Europe. And people were like, it can't happen, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it did happen. And at the end of the 3 years of that Development Impact Bond, the third-party evaluator came out with the results and showed that Educate Girls was able to enroll 92% of all out-of-school girls at the end of the 3 years, which is fantastic. And they said that our learning targets, we actually overshot them, and we achieved like some 160% of what we were expected to achieve on learning, which meant that our children were actually getting an additional year of schooling for the average child. And again, think about it, you know, and delivered by a community volunteer, by somebody from that community who was like a 12th class young person. And so this was really, I think, a turning point. In 2018, when the Development Impact Bond results came out, I kind of knew that now I had an organization that didn't just know how to scale, but now it knew how to scale results, not scale an activity or an input. It was actually scaling a result, because a Development Impact Bond is essentially a payment by results or a pay for performance kind of a contract. And I think that is really important when we talk about scale, is really like, how do you marry scale with quality? And the DIB is kind of one aspect of that. But I think, and I wanted to kind of focus on 2 or 3 things that the DIB brought out, which I think, you know, we've now looked at and again, as part of self-reflection, that allows us to marry scale with quality. Is one is, you have a razor sharp focus on results. So you don't think of scale as outreach or, you know, touch, reach, and transform, but you really look at the result that you want to see, and therefore scaling of that result. So it's a very, very razor sharp focus on results. To be able to do that, you have immense amount of data-driven decision making. Everything is about data, and you don't make decisions because, you know, that's what you think you should do, but you do it based on data. And our field teams are so good with like looking at data and kind of deciding, okay, do I go left? Do I go right? How do I dial it up? Do I dial it down? What do I need to do? And that data also allows you to build superior performance management systems. And I think if you want to scale results, That is what is absolutely key. And nobody tells you that. People tell you about a monitoring and evaluation system, but they don't give you money to build a performance management system. By which what I mean is that in a traditional nonprofit, data gets collected, baseline, falana, dimkana, whatever, blah, blah. And then you aggregate it every level, then you put it in a report and you analyze it and you give it to the donor. But if you want to scale impact and if you want to scale results, the data behaves very differently. You collect it at the field level, you crunch it, and you feed it right back with insights to your field teams. The data and the organization is in service of your field worker. And that's what is really, really key and different and absolutely essential to scaling impact. And that has to really kind of enable their course correction. And then the third thing that the DIB really allowed us to do is, because money was tied to result and not to an activity, it leads to an enormous amount of decentralization, flexibility, because you give your teams flexibility to run after the result versus just, plotting whatever. And what we realized was that impact is always highest where you have hyper local teams. And it's really amazing to see it again and again and again, that the closer your teams are to the ground, the better impact and results that you're going to have. Yeah, and so after the DIB actually, because of all of this data-driven stuff and things, it threw up this insight. And it showed us that 5% of villages in India actually have 40% of the out-of-school girls. It's a highly geographically concentrated problem. And because we had such big data sets, we had door-to-door survey data from like millions and millions of households. We were able to do a lot of predictive analytics and machine learning to actually be able to now identify and pinpoint which are those 5% of the villages. And so really that's what we built our audacious 5-year vision on, saying that in these 5 years, we were going to scale to these 5% of the villages, saturate these 35,000 villages, which have the highest number of out-of-school girls, and really solve the problem and bring 1.5 million girls back into school. And I have to say, and if we can do that, it will set off a huge multiplier effect from health, nutrition, employability, child marriage. There's so many things that will get unleashed. However, more than anything, we want to do this because it is that little girl's right. So I'll end here. I am Safeena Husain and I educate girls. Thank you.
Well, if that wasn't inspiring, then I don't know. Thank you, Safeena. That was really fantastic. And as I say, if you have a chance, have a look at her TED Talk. You drew out so many important learnings there, but one of the things that Jamie raised earlier on, and you've repeated it, is it's about working with people, not doing it to them. And that is a big lesson, which I think is transferable across everywhere. Okay, so let's move to something a little bit different. I now want to introduce Seema Mehta, who's going to talk to us about learning from the arts. So Seema is a Kathak dance expert as well as a jewelry designer, and therein lies a story that she may or may not tell you. She graduated from the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, specializing in painting, but accidentally found her way into dance. That was her moment of truth. So she is the director of Chandham, Nritya, Bharati, as a leading Kathak school in Mumbai, with affiliate schools in North America. And her passion lies in teaching Kathak to the next generation and passing on the cultural, the oral traditions she has learned under the legendary Pandit Chitresh Das. She believes in empowering children, especially the underprivileged, through the arts, which she is currently doing in Mumbai. Also, as a solo artist, Seema has performed extensively in prestigious festivals and venues across India and North America. And if you want to look her up on YouTube, you can find her doing some amazing tap dancing with a pretty famous North American tap dancer. Seema was awarded the Nari Shakti Puraskar Award in 2019 for her exceptional work in empowering women through the arts. And Seema is going to treat us to something very interesting. She will begin with an invocation. So over to you, Seema.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for inviting me to such a prestigious gathering. I'm so blown away by Safeena's speech and work. It's by far one of the most inspiring things I've heard. So thank you so much, Safeena, to you and to your entire family and group that is doing this and making this possible for the world. I think we need more people like you. It's incredibly inspiring, so thank you so much. Thank you, Ganesh, for inviting me to Samvaad 2020. Of course, SVP is doing phenomenal work as well, and I'm truly honored to be here today. So we all know that the arts inspire, inform, and advance communities. Artists create and shape a more vibrant ecosystem and landscape for us all to live. And yet there lies a major disconnect between our perception and our actions in weaving the arts as an important integral part of our education system. It is often treated as a hobby and not as a main profession. Dance is not a hobby, but a way of life. For the audience, it may perhaps be entertainment, but for the practitioner, it has a spiritual purpose. Let me share with you briefly about my history and my artistic journey. So I trained with the legendary Kathak master, Pandit Chitresh Das, who was a child prodigy, grew up in Kolkata. And in 1971, he went from Calcutta, at that time, Calcutta, now Kolkata, from Calcutta to California with $8 in his pocket and a ghungru bag and a tabla bag, and a mission to transform lives through dance. He trained generation after generations, many students and disciples. And his first generation of students were all of American origin. And that makes me, that makes me feel so good, because we often tend to think of classical dance attached to a particular culture. But in that time, in the 70s, he truly always believed that this art has no boundaries and is for everyone, truly. So he trained generations of incredible dancers and dance company and built through his blood, sweat, and tears. So this is one man going with this mission to the United States after having performed and taught so much in India. I first saw his performance in '99, and I grew up in Belgium and had no idea about Indian classical dance. Really, I hadn't had much exposure to it. And his one performance blew my mind. And I realized that, this is something I'd like to pursue and learn. And I didn't know too much beyond that. So I began to learn, and that training truly shaped me physically, mentally, and emotionally. But it is not until I moved to Kolkata and trained with him in a Gurukul setting from 6 a.m. to, till night, where we trained in so many different facets, and really, I would say he shaped us to yet another level. It is when I saw him performing in India and I saw the reaction of the youth when they saw him and the energy that came out, that the transformational quality of dance became so apparent and evident to me. At that time in Kolkata, I met Urmi Basu, who runs the New Light Foundation, and they do incredible work from the terrace of a temple in Kalighat in Kolkata, opposite the Kali temple, actually, which is the red light district. And these girls are basically, you know, have very little future for them. If anything, their mothers who are sex workers are probably don't know any better or don't know what else to do with them, but to, again, have them, you know, do the same profession. And so Urmi does this fantastic work of giving them education and exposing them to the arts. And so I had this amazing opportunity to work with these 12 girls who, after a few years of training, both with my Guruji and other students who lived in Kolkata, got invited to perform in Germany. And I think for them, it was a dream to, you know, just get out of their state to see the rest of India. And here they were on a train, traveling from city to city in Germany, performing. So it was quite a success story. And I realized that more and more in different ways, how the arts is empowering them. Soon after that, in 2010, I founded Chandham Nritya Bharati in Mumbai. And you know, it was very apparent to me that dance was truly for the privileged, and learning Kathak was not available to everyone. Not easily available in government schools, not easily available. It's actually more available in private schools, who anyway, those children anyways have access to, you know, extracurricular activities, which is of course not how we like to label what we do, but they have the access to education in such a different way. And so I made it a point at Chandham in Mumbai to make this accessible and available to more. And I won't say to all, but it's, you know, we're trying to expand this now. And so we had the wonderful experience, I would say, to build our relationship with children from Akanksha, Smile, and many other NGOs. We taught students from the Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Vidyalaya in Dharavi. And so we've built in these 10 years an incredible group of 5 teachers who go out and teach. And they all really believe in this mission of, you know, making this art accessible. So I think what's incredible is now to see that the current project that we're working on is a group of enthusiastic girls and boys who are learning from us at the Beramji Gigi Bhoy Home for Children. And the love and the energy, the love that we get when we go there is quite unmatched. And to see what kind of you know, excitement they have to learn this and the energy that it gives them is very, very touching. And what we realized through this is, you know, we may think at first, but what is this going to do for them? You know, it can create livelihood if they decide to take it on professionally and to train seriously. That is definitely an option. But what is really also important is, in fact, going back to the red light district story, the mothers looked at me, you know, really quite oddly the first day, and they thought, what is this girl going to do with our girls? And, you know, how is dance going to help them? And why is she here? And just 3 days later, they did a very small, you know, we did a workshop together for 3 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, I took them back to their terrace and I went with them and they fed me this incredible meal and they performed for their mothers. And that moment to me where the mothers lined up to thank me one by one, held my hand and kissed my hand, it felt to me like a greater reward or award, you know, that I could ever get. To see them smiling, which was quite rare actually, to see them smile and to see them so happy, to see that their daughters did something so beautiful and empowering was such a strong feeling for them as well. And they wanted to see them go deeper into this art form and into this discipline. So our aim through this Seva project that we do is to really make this more accessible. And this is where I think many of you could join hands with us and help us empower through dance and also help us bring this mission of bringing art, dignity, and joy in their lives. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Oh, Seema, that was wonderful. And it just illustrates different angle and how you can inspire people in such a different way. And I've been looking on the chat line. You have definitely touched a number of people through both your presentation and your dance. So thank you again for that.
Thank you.
We shall now move on to our next speaker. This is so wonderful. We're really spoiled for wonderful speakers. I want to introduce Zareena Screwvala, who is the co-founder of Swades Foundation. So she works as the full-time managing trustee and director. The foundation operates with a single-minded focus of empowering rural India through holistic and sustainable growth. The foundation is already quite large, 300 full-time staff who work in more than 2,300 hamlets, impacting over 500,000 people across drinking water and sanitation, nutrition, health, education, as well as farming, animal husbandry, and skilling. An enormous coverage of activities. Zareena is especially interested in education that is joyful and empowering. And I think we heard a little bit about that just before. She's also a member of the UN Women's Business Sector Advisory Council. And in case you don't know, Zareena was one of the founders of UTV, now part of Walt Disney India. So when you meet her, if you haven't, you'll be in no doubt as to how she thrived in the media and entertainment industry. And she's using those skills and experience to great advantage to put her foundation on the map. And I loved talking to her, and I'm sure you'll love hearing from her. She's going to talk to us about her vision for transforming rural India by creating what she calls permanent, irreversible change in the lives of 1 million people in India in the next 5 to 6 years. So here we have another bold and audacious goal. Over to you, Zareena.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm so inspired to hear the stories that we heard before. Safeena, Seema, you are so lovely. Paul, what a wonderful job to predict the future. And thank you for your insights. Govind, thank you for inviting me here. You know, I mean, really, this whole business of being audacious, I think, really applies to all of us on the panel and probably all the panelists before. But we were a bunch of media people, Ronnie and myself, who had this crazy dream, which Ronnie told me one evening when he thought I was joining Teach for India, that he said, let's lift 1 million people out of poverty. And I thought, you know, we had just divested in UTV and I was sort of like lost. It was my baby. I had been working in it for 30 years. I'm now, you know, I was like lost. And I thought, what a crazy, mad idea. And we set out on this journey of a voyage of discovery. And we came up with some principles after we did this study, because I think one good thing about us is that we knew nothing. We knew nothing about poverty alleviation. So about 6 years ago, we decided to create the way we wanted to do it, the way we wanted to actually build scale eventually, is to first create a model of rural development, okay, which is capable of lifting 1 million people out of poverty. And then we added this even more audacious goal, as if we didn't have enough problems, of every 5 years, 5 to 6 years. Some we allow ourselves 7 years. Okay, let's see if we can do it. But it's a model. Now, how would it work? And the key is that we should be able to exit after that. We should not need to stay in that same geography forever and ever, okay? So we developed a few principles, which I'd like to share with you. One thing that one of the people previously said is there's no silver bullet. So we deeply believe, and this is after a lot of study and really meeting communities and talking to hundreds of people we spoke to, and we recognized that there was no silver bullet to poverty alleviation. So we created at that time, 6 years ago, which everyone thought was totally mad and totally stupid. I would say crazy, stupid, please don't do it. We were advised by everyone we spoke to in the year before. When we went back and presented our plan to them, we decided to do a holistic model of poverty, of development, a holistic model. So as Mark very sweetly went through, it's water, drinking water, it's an individual household toilet, it's a large amount of health interventions which are community-led, education, and multiple livelihoods. Okay, so that's one principle, 360 degrees, okay, where we got a lot of flack, I have to say. The other one was collaborate, collab. This is definitely our media learning. I mean, you cannot make a film and decide to be the director, the actor, the producer, the scriptwriter, and the music director. You have to go get the best people, surround yourself with excellence, right? So we believe in this deeply collaborative model where the community is actually in the center. It's a community-centric model. The community comes first. And then we build layers around government, corporates. We pull in expert NGOs, markets. We go find markets for the produce. So it's this ecosystem of rural development that we're trying to create. The other tenet is that we have a geographical approach. And I think Safeena touched on that. And I think it's really essential. And again, everyone thought, what a stupid thing to do. But today we really believe that this is very important. We take an entire geography at a time, like a block or half a block. And we work within every, it's a little like Safeena's, that we do everything in that block, all our interventions in that block, okay? So today we work in a contiguous geography of about 2,500 villages, 500,000 people. The other thing is, while we call ourselves a foundation, because it sounds better than an NGO, to be honest, we are actually an NGO. We are a grassroots execution foundation. We have 300 full-time staff who are embedded in the communities they serve. They're often from the community, but even if they're not there, they live right there in the villages, okay? And we have 1,000 volunteers, community volunteers, actually all ladies. And above all, the most important thing we believe in is that poverty is not just material. And I think we've all touched on this. Poverty really is more mental than material. We believe poverty begins in the mind. And we believe this kind of mental poverty, actually it's the thing that really breaks my heart, to see this mental poverty, which we see as a lack of hope, that kuch nahi hone wala hai. Things are like this and they will always be like this, and we can do nothing to change it. We've never had our children go to school, we don't have a proper teacher, whatever the problems are, this is how it is, and there's nothing we can do. For me, this lack of hope, this lack of any kind of aspiration, any kind of pathway for change is truly heartbreaking. So we work very hard to create this can-do attitude in our communities. And we have a saying for them. We call it Swa se bane des, which means Swa means me and des means country. I make my country. I make my life. I make my community. Okay. And I'll just share with you, to end, I will share with you a few stories of one of the things we've done, which we're very proud of. In the last 1 year, we set up these village development committees. And I need to tell you that when we started, we were very corporate. We had these goals and we had these targets, and we were very target oriented, which means we must have, 1,000 goats in the community and 2,000 buffaloes and this and that. And it was not the right way to go. We said rural empowerment, but to be honest, our real learning was we weren't really doing it correctly. We were kind of pushing things onto people. It is not the right way. And we took a deep breath and we recognized our big mistake, and we paused, and then we said, okay, let's really be who we say we are, which is a rural empowerment. We are all about rural empowerment. How to do this? Village development committees. We set them up. There's a particular way we do it. You can check it out on the website if you're interested. I won't go, but it's equal ladies, men, youth, everybody's involved in the village. It is the smallest possible homogeneous group of people that we can work with, so that the change comes rapidly and it's accepted rapidly. And I'll tell you, with this COVID, and we also had Nisarg, okay, we never stopped working. We were able to work because not only our 300 people, bravely, most of them volunteered to go into the field during COVID and Nisarg, after Nisarg happened, and actually work with the communities that they serve. The communities came out and said, we will help to do whatever you want. And we were able to get in touch with them after 3 days of Nisarg because all the phones were dead. But after that, we got in touch with everybody. During COVID, we were in touch with everybody. We distributed food. We continued our livelihood programs, distributing and training people in new orchards and goatry and poultry. It was like nothing ever stopped. It was quite incredible story. The VDCs, these village development committees, actually designed a whole SOP for their village during COVID. It was incredible. And they did this on their own. And then we took pockets of excellence and then we showed it to other VDCs and said, look what they're doing, why don't you try it? It didn't even come from us. And in February, Ronnie and I were going to a celebration in one of our poorest blocks, which is called Sudagar. And it's got a lot of tribal and really very, very needy people. And we had set up, we were celebrating with 100 of the VDCs there. And when we came in, we were delighted to see the whole venue, the entire venue, and there were more than 1,000 people there, was being managed by the youth of the VDCs. Okay, so when we came in, we had to fill a form, hand it over to the youth. The youth would check it and say, madam, you haven't filled this, and then give it back, you know. So the whole venue was being managed by them. There was a group of young girls who came together from tribal and non-tribal to do a dance for the very first time they danced together. It was I was like, this is a beautiful way to go. And this is something they wanted to do. They wanted to do. And finally, when we were going home, just to end, we met a group of ladies who were walking home looking really happy. And I saw that they were carrying a trophy on their head. They were one of the winners of the dance competition. So we stopped and we got out to talk to them. And they said something to me. They said, you know, we were always used to carrying water on our heads. But today, thanks to you, we're carrying home a trophy. So with that, I'd like to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zareena. That was lovely. And as I said, it's easy to see how you're very comfortable talking to people and inspiring people. On the chat line, somebody said, when you said crazy stupid, they wrote crazy stupid equals genius. I think that's pretty good. So you can see some themes are clearly emerging here. And the big one, just to repeat it again, is about putting people first, putting the community first is something you all share. So now I want to turn to our final speaker, Alina Alam. So Alina is just 25 years old. She's the founder of and CEO of Mitti, which is a chain of cafes that are completely managed by adults with physical, intellectual, and psychiatric disabilities. Alina believes that compassion and courage are the two most powerful tools, and she believes that development is inclusive and can only happen by embracing and empowering people from the most vulnerable factions of the society. And she thinks the best way to do this is through enabling people with disabilities to provide them with sustainable livelihoods and to lead a life with dignity. Would you believe that Alina founded her first NGO in Mumbai at the age of 18, or while she was in her first year in college? She's one motivated individual, and she has been featured in the Forbes list of 30 under 30. She's been a recipient of many awards for recognizing her work. When you first meet Alina, as I have, you will be taken with her infectious enthusiasm. So she's going to tell us the story of Mitti, and I want to hand over to Alina.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I'm actually so overwhelmed by the kind of passion that I've seen on the panelists ahead of me, it is very difficult for me to talk, after hearing all of them. Honestly, it is very, very difficult, but then, I'll take up the challenge and, will speak from my heart like I always do. To start off with, I started my journey of Mitti Cafe 3 years back. And I met SVP when we were one cafe, one employee, and perhaps I think 3 months old. And this in the next 7-8 minutes that we'll talk, I'll tell you the reason why they even decided to give me, take me in as an incubator, give me grants. And this is an answer that I figured out in the course of these 3 years. And it is only now that perhaps I'm just close to the answer. So I will start by introducing you to the guy who's changed my life. Can you all see my screen? Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So this is the guy who's changed my life. So for those of y'all who don't know who he is, well, I was sitting in my classroom, final year of college, waiting for placements to happen. And then this guy happens to me. Who is he? His name is Nero. So Nero was this emperor in the ancient Roman Empire. Mighty, rich, would win one war after the other and the other and the other. And then one day he won the biggest battle of his life. And then when you win, what do? Kya karte ho aap? I mean, you celebrate, right? You party. And that's what he decided to do. So he threw a party and he invited the who's who of Tinseltown, kings and queens and princes and princesses. And then when evening befell, our Nero had this idea. Why not burn some waste to generate light? The party needs lights, right? And that's what he did. He burned the waste. He burned the prisoners of war and the poor people he captured, who he considered no more than waste. And sitting in that classroom, that 22, 23-year-old something, realized that the problem is not Nero, because there'll always be Neros in this world. The problem that girl realized was that the problem is Nero's guests, as to how they could sing, dance, and drink when fellow human beings burned and died. And I remember myself sitting in that class and, a tear trickling down my cheeks when I realized my reality. At that point, I realized that I was one of Nero's guests. Well, friends, if you feel something about something and you don't do anything about it, then you've taken a side. It's important to know that. I realized that if I don't do anything about, things that I'm passionate, I passionately feel about, then I've taken the side of the oppressor. I'm helping the oppressor. I decided not to sit for placements. I decided I couldn't remain Nero's guest. I instead started volunteering with organizations working in the inclusion space, and I realized that the problem is not what I thought the problem is. The problem is not that there are 70 lakh people with disabilities in our country and 1.2 billion across the world. That's not the problem. The problem is not their ability, but the disability in our perception that needed to change. Hence, I decided to create a model that is visible, tangible, interactive, and that could generate awareness about inclusion, and the failure or the success of the model would directly be dependent on the community. And hence, with empty pockets, failed sales attempts, and multiple rejections, I started Mitti. And that's when I came across SVP. And before that, I'll take you back to this picture, which is, which has been life-changing for me. Yes. Yeah. So what you see in front of you is this girl. So when I started Mitti, I wrote to several corporates in Bangalore. Bangalore is a metropolitan city. And at that point of time, not many corporates were willing to give us, a space. And which is when I shifted to this place called Hubli, which is in North Karnataka. And I went from door to door, shop to shop, house to house, distributing vacancy pamphlets. that if you have a disability, education no bar, experience no bar. If you want to learn, you come. 1 week, I didn't get any response. And then something happened that changed the course of what Mitti Cafe is today. You see this picture in front of you? I remember this girl. She came in crawling for the interview because at that point of time, her parents could not afford a wheelchair. That girl, you know, if you would give her a pen, her hands would shake and it would fall. A lot of things biology cannot explain. 4 months down the line, that same girl started counting money like a professional. It's been 3 years for this girl, the girl who came in crawling for the interview, the girl who couldn't hold a cup of coffee. Today, sitting on her wheelchair, she manages 8 other people with disabilities. She's the manager for our first cafe. And where is she today? Well, this is where she is today. Not only is she the manager for our first cafe, but she's also a motivational speaker. And while I speak to you today, we have 13 cafes in the last 3 years within corporates like Wipro, Infosys, Accenture, Wells Fargo, and so on, run completely by adults with disabilities. And in the last 3 years, we've served over more than 5 million meals through our cafes. And we've been able to not just manage those over 5 million meals completely with our adults with disabilities, with physical, intellectual, and psychiatric disabilities, but in turn, with every meal, we get a chance to create awareness about inclusion. Okay, so you see this picture in front of you. So I said that we also employ adults with intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. Well, for a lot of us, you know, when you talk about adults with intellectual disabilities, you feel, oh, they're crazy, they're aimless, they don't know what they're doing. Well, our experience has been very different. I had gone to purchase newspapers. All that I saw this boy doing for the 7-8 minutes that I observed him was, he was moving from one point to the other and back. So with the limited Kannada is a language in our country, a beautiful language. Unfortunately, I didn't know much of it then because I'm from Bengal. So I was like, Awa. Awa means mother. Take me to your mother. He took me to his mother. And you know what I saw? 1 plastic sheet, 4 bamboo poles, and a mother. They were living off the streets. This boy has got autism. So when he came in, 15 days down the line, he comes to me. He's like, Didi means sister, advance. I was like, what are you going to do with advance? You know what he says? He tells me, and you know, for a lot of y'all, this may be very simple, but for me, it was definitely a milestone when this boy comes to me and says, Didi, shaving. So for us in the global, you know, in the food industry, global food hygiene safety standards are of paramount importance. With our adults with disabilities, we use different techniques of training, definitely more patience, but then they show us magic. So this boy comes to me, he's like, Didi, shaving. That's why he needed that advance. This is the first day he came in clean shaven into the counter. And I still remember, you know, the first day that I saw him, I don't know how many days he didn't take a bath, how many days he didn't shave. Today he earned the salary. And he has a house of his own. This boy with autism pays for the rent of his house. And a Times of India reporter had come to cover us. And, I pointed to Kirti, meet Kirti, blah, blah, blue, our manager. And I pointed to this boy. I was like, introduce yourself. And you know what he says? He says, I, Rajshekhar, assistant manager, Mitti Cafe, BBB College, Hubli, full stop. And he learned the word full stop from somewhere and it was actually published. And yes, he is our assistant manager. Well, the picture that you see in front of you is of a very renowned personality. Mr. Narayan Murthy is the founder of Infosys. A lot of us, including me, love him. But the hero of the picture is not Mr. Murthy. So, so there is a Costa Coffee that employs adults with disabilities. There's a Hatti Coffee that does the same. Cafe Coffee, they're doing fantabulous work. I mean, why does a, Mitti something cafe even need to exist? Well, we need to exist because of this story till we get outdated, and we really hope that happens soon. So the hero of the picture is this little boy you see in front of Mr. Murthy. His name is Bhairappa. Now, Bhairappa was rejected at 7 job fairs for persons with disabilities, which means 80 odd jobs that he's had for and he got rejected. Which is when, we got lucky and he came to us. I have not cropped this picture. So when Bhairappa came in, he did not know the concept of brushing his teeth or even wearing slippers. Today, that same boy, you see, you see this graph, you see that orange little arrow, you see what's written on top in green. It says team lead. Today, he's leading our entire team. He's the trainer for our cafe at Infosys. And not just that, you all will be happy to know something very interesting has happened with our Bhairappa. So what you see in front of you is Rupa. So Bhairappa has got dwarfism and motor disability. So he's got multiple disabilities. He met Rupa, who has dwarfism. They're going to get married in the next 10 days. So he's not just, been working exceptionally well, earning with dignity, but today he's found love at Mitti Cafe. So COVID happened, right? And, we predominantly situated within corporate tech parks and, all the corporates shut down. I mean, they've temporarily shut down. We have, hundreds of employees with disabilities who've been, working with dignity. We thought, what are we going to do? Then we realized that the holy grail is to have faith in the community. You know what we did during COVID? We realized that, Mitti Cafe is it's just a name, but it is more of a concept that belongs to every individual, every one of you all sitting there. We went back to the community and we said that, hey, this is the crisis. If you want us to survive, we need your support. We started our campaign on Milap with, again, guidance from, a lot of our SVP partners, a lot of my mentors, and in 14 days, we could raise 10 million in just 14 days. And this has been led by a lot of our youth ambassadors, a lot of young people who join and intern with us from across the world. People who believe in inclusion. And not just that, the picture that you see in front of you, what does that say? It says 1 million meals and smiles served by Team Mitti. And so we also rehabilitate a lot of adults from the road who were either with disabilities from the road, who were either begging or were homeless. So they permanently live in our accommodation. And during COVID, they were staying with us. So one of them, Hemant, he comes to me and he says, he's got cerebral palsy. He says, sister, people are hungry. We know how to cook. These 2 lines. And that was a call of action for Mitti Cafe, standing for what we believe in. Which is when we started with 100 meals. Today, we've crossed over 1 million meals in the last 6 months that have been cooked and served by our team of adults with disabilities. We've served the economically vulnerable. We have served the homeless. And, we are, continuing to do that. So this is, again, you see Bhairappa, he is on the field, and, we're doing it across 4 cities today. Why have I come back to this picture? Well, I've come back to this picture because this is the picture. This is the only thing that I had when I came to SVP. This is the only picture. A couple of months old, 3 employees, hardly any number of meals served, hardly any impact matrix. And I walked into this room with this one picture and this one story of Kirti, and with the vision of creating, 1 billion Kirtis across the world. So the awareness that we can create via our cafes with every meal served. So when I walked in, I remembered that, later I came to know that you have, Mr. Krishna Kumar as one of the panelists. You had, you had Mr. Eric Savage, and then I had, one of the most wonderful mentors that, have led us to where we are today, Pradeep sir, Lalit sir, Sashi ma'am. And I was, thankfully I didn't do a lot of my homework. Then I didn't know who these people were. So I just went and presented. Later, I asked them that, I actually went through your portfolio and, you've had such wonderful organizations. We we were just starting. Why did you even take us? You know what they said? This is what my mentors told me. Alina, you had nothing. They asked me what CapEx and OpEx is. I asked them that, what is CapEx and OpEx? I was so bad, and here I was out to do, a social enterprise that involves numbers. So they told me, Alina, you had nothing but passion and a willingness to learn, a hunger to learn. So this is our first cafe. When you see Kirti's story here, you also T is labeled as T. We were that bad when we started. Today you see this picture here. On the right, it is our cafe at Wipro. On the left, it is our cafe at IQVIA at Prestige Tech Park. And you can see Lakshmi there. Lakshmi is a single mother of 2 children, only earning member of our family. And she can't hear and speak. She's our assistant manager. Well, the improvement that you see from, the previous picture to this picture is what is the journey that I've paved with SVP. SVP saw me here. And they believed that perhaps I could be here. I was rejected from every incubation center I had applied to. I remember that, it's very emotional for me, but, one of these incubation centers had taken me, I will not name it, and, you had to go and pitch. And when you pitched, there were judges who were marking you on your scalability, business plan, whatever, and then last was passion. You know how much they scored me on passion? Unanimously, 3 judges. They gave me 1 out of 5. And I went back home and I cried. And that day I realized that if I would have listened to my head and what the world was talking about me or what the world felt about me, I would have betrayed my heart. And the heart or your intuition is definitely more powerful than or more intelligent than your head is sometimes. And it is when, it is after that I came across SVP. And, while all of y'all talk about that, hey, there is so much, so much of problem, atrocities, prejudice, injustice happening in the world. Where do I start from? I mean, does it really make a difference in terms of what I do? What about scale? I had the same questions. And then, like most stories somehow come to me to change my life, this story did too. So to end with, there was this, there was a high tide and there was this young girl. So the shore was full of starfishes, millions of starfishes. So this young girl was picking up one starfish, throwing it into the water, the other starfish, throwing it into the water. And a wise old man comes and tells the young girl, hey, young girl, what are you doing? She doesn't respond. She continues to do what she's doing. Then the old man again asks, young girl, what are you doing? Is this some kind of a game? The entire, shore is full of millions of starfishes. What difference does it make? She said nothing. She just picked up one starfish, threw it back into the water. And she tells the old man, it made a difference to that one. So for me, my starfish was Kirti, and every day it is a pursuit to find more Kirtis, more stories, till we reach the billionth Kirti across the world, a world where economic independence and dignity is no longer a privilege, but is a norm, not just in paper, but in practice and in our hearts. And never ever underestimate your power to bring a difference to the life of that one Kirti. To that one Kirti, it is that Kirti's life. It is that Kirti's entire world. And, 2 lines that don't let me sleep at night. It is by one of my favorite poets, Dushyant Singh, and he says, and I'll translate it for you. मेरे सीने में नहीं तो तेरे सीने में सही हो कहीं भी आग लेकिन आग जलनी चाहिए. Remember that we cannot reach the billionth Kirtis unless we tag along people. So these 2 lines say that irrespective of whether the ignition is in my heart or yours, irrespective of whether I live or die, the ignition has to continue. The light can never get off. And that can only happen through participation, through sharing these powerful stories, through believing in yourself and believing in the power of the community, being adamant and believing in the power of believing. Thank you so much.
That was awesome, Alina. And what a wonderful way to end this panel. We are over time, so thank you so much for that. It was really lovely. In the beginning, I'll just take a minute to say, I talked about the characteristics of the panelists, about vision, about bold aspiration, about courage, about determination, heaps of, and passion for impact. And I shared with you that they each had a personal story, which I hope they would share. I think you've seen all of that, plus, plus, plus. So I hope there's no time to join all the dots, But I think we can learn from each one of those. And in a way, I think the panelists can actually learn from each other. And there are some interesting collaborative opportunities across all the things that they talked about. So I'm going to call it to a close now.